Right now, the average rent for a property in London sits somewhere between 2,200 and 2,700 quid a month, depending on which data source you trust and which quarter's figures you're looking at. That's already eye-watering. That's already forcing people to spend 40% or more of their income just to keep a roof over their heads. But here's the uncomfortable reality that property analysts and forecasters are all quietly agreeing on. By the end of 2026, possibly sooner, the average London rent is going to break through £3,000 a month. In central areas, two-bedroom flats are already hitting that mark and going beyond it. But we're not talking about Mayfair penthouses or Knightsbridge townhouses anymore. We're talking about ordinary flats in ordinary boroughs occupied by ordinary working people who are running out of options and running out of money. So how did we get here? And more importantly, why won't it stop? Let's establish where we actually are right now before we talk about where we're heading. The most recent data from the third quarter of 2025 puts the average London rent at roughly £2,227 per month according to some sources, whilst others like Hamptons and Rightmove are reporting figures closer to 2,700 quid. The variation depends on methodology, what types of properties are included, and which boroughs are weighted most heavily, but the range gives you a sense of the market. Rents have climbed by 7.3% in the past year alone, according to some reports, whilst others put the year-on-year increase at closer to 11%. Compared to 2024, certain boroughs have seen increases of over 14%. And when you zoom out and compare today's rents to pre-pandemic levels, we're looking at a rise of roughly 40% in less than 5 years. That's not gradual inflation. That's a market that's broken. Londoners are now spending between 38% and 42% of their income on rent, depending on their salary and location. Financial advisors have been saying for decades that you shouldn't spend more than 30% of your income on housing if you want any kind of stable financial life. But that threshold is a distant memory for most renters in the capital. The most expensive boroughs are exactly the ones you'd expect. Kensington and Chelsea top the list with an average rent of 3,615 quid a month. Westminster comes in second at 3,251. Camden is sitting at 2,800 quid, up 10% from 2024. Hackney, once considered affordable by London standards, is now averaging £2,557 a month, a 9% jump in just 12 months. Even the cheapest borough in London, Bexley, is charging an average of 1,485 quid a month, which is still above the national average of 1,344. There is nowhere cheap in London anymore. The concept doesn't exist. And in central London, two-bedroom flats are already surpassing £3,000 a month in many areas. This isn't a future prediction. It's happening right now. Walk through Shoreditch, Clerkenwell, Borough, anywhere within Zone 2, and you'll see listings at 3,200, 3,400, even 3,800 quid for a bog-standard two-bed flat with no garden, no parking, and service charges that'll take another few hundred quid a month on top. These aren't luxury developments with concierge services and rooftop pools. These are normal flats in normal buildings, and they're commanding prices that would have been unthinkable 5 years ago. And it's about to get significantly worse. The forecasts coming out of the major property analysts are remarkably consistent, and none of them are optimistic. Knight Frank is predicting rental growth of 4% in both prime central and outer London for 2026. Savills has forecast continued growth through 2028, estimating a total increase of 19% between 2024 and 2028. Hamptons is projecting 4% increases in both 2026 and 2027. And Luxury Playbook, which tracks the higher end of the market, has stated outright that two-bedroom flats in central London will surpass £3,000 per month on average by the end of 2026. Even mid-tier boroughs like Croydon, Barking and Dagenham, places that used to be escape routes for people priced out of inner London, are expected to hit 1,800 to 2,100 quid a month within the next year or so. If you take a conservative average of these forecasts, we're looking at London's average rent reaching somewhere between £2,900 and £3,100 per month by the end of 2026. That's an extra 150 to 400 quid a month for the exact same property. Put another way, the annual cost of renting in London, which currently sits at around £26,000, is on track to hit 35 to 37,000 quid by late next year. That's more than the median salary in many parts of the UK. People will be paying more in rent than an entire household earns in other cities. And three things are driving this trajectory, and all three of them are getting worse, not better. The first and most critical factor is supply, or rather, the catastrophic lack of it. London's rental supply is up by only 6%, compared to a 20% increase nationally. That tells you everything you need to know about how uniquely dysfunctional the capital's market has become. At the same time, 31% of all properties currently listed for sale in London are coming from landlords who are exiting the rental market entirely. In the fourth quarter of 2024 alone, 40,000 former rental properties were put up for sale across the city. Of those, only 3,600 were relet by new landlords. The rest were bought by owner-occupiers or investors who have no intention of renting them out. That's a net loss of over 18,000 rental homes in just a few months, and the pace hasn't slowed. Across the UK as a whole, more than 50,000 rental properties were removed from the market in 2024. London accounts for a disproportionate chunk of that figure. Why is supply shrinking so fast? The answer is a perfect storm of financial pressure and regulatory hostility. Landlords are fleeing because the economics simply don't work anymore. The Bank of England base rate has gone from 0.25% in early 2022 to 5% today. If you're a landlord with a mortgage on your rental property, and the vast majority are, your monthly interest payments have roughly tripled in less than 4 years. Rental income hasn't kept pace, so margins have evaporated. On top of that, the Section 24 tax changes that were phased in between 2017 and 2020 removed the ability for landlords to deduct mortgage interest from their taxable rental income. For higher-rate taxpayers, that change alone wiped out any profit they were making. Then there's the looming requirement for all rental properties to meet a minimum energy performance certificate rating of C by 2028. For older properties, and London is absolutely full of them, that means spending £10,000 to £25,000 per property on insulation, boilers, double glazing, and other upgrades. Many landlords simply don't have that kind of cash lying around. Add to that the Renters' Rights Act, which we've already covered in detail, but is worth mentioning again here because it's accelerating the exodus. The abolition of Section 21 no-fault evictions means landlords can no longer quickly regain possession of their properties if things go wrong. Every eviction will now require a court hearing, and with the courts already backlogged, that process could take 6 to 9 months or longer. The risk has gone up, the costs have gone up, and the returns have gone down. Rental yields in London have collapsed to between 3 and 4% annually. Compare that to Manchester or Birmingham, where yields are still sitting at 7 to 8%, and you can see why landlords are taking their capital elsewhere or simply cashing out entirely. And the supposed solution, build-to-rent developments by institutional investors, isn't filling the gap. Build-to-rent starts are down 45% year on year. Developers are pausing projects because the returns don't justify the investment, and planning permissions are at their lowest level since 2006. The government keeps promising 88,000 new homes a year for London, but the city is only managing to build around 50,000. The gap between what's needed and what's being delivered is enormous, and it's widening. Supply is shrinking, and there's no cavalry coming to rescue the situation. Meanwhile, demand isn't dropping. In fact, it's doing the opposite. Demand for rental properties in London is currently 30% above pre-pandemic levels. The ratio of renters to available properties has climbed to 5 renters for every 1 property listed, up from 4.6 to 1 earlier in the year. Why is demand staying so high when prices are through the roof and everyone's complaining about affordability? Because the alternative, buying a home, has become even more impossible than renting. The average deposit for a first-time buyer in London is now £144,000. Even with 2 decent incomes, saving that kind of money takes over a decade for most people, especially when rent is swallowing 40% of your salary every month. And even if you somehow manage to scrape together a deposit, mortgage affordability tests are keeping people out. House prices in London have actually fallen slightly over the past couple of years, down about 5% from their 2022 peak. You'd think that would help first-time buyers, but it hasn't because interest rates have exploded. A £400,000 mortgage that cost £1,100 a month in 2021 is now costing £2,600 a month or more. That's more than double the payment for the same property. Lenders don't just check whether you can afford today's rate either. They stress test you at rates of 8% or higher to make sure you could still pay if things got worse. That means buyers need to prove they've got significantly more income than they actually do, and most people simply can't meet that bar. The average age of a first-time buyer in London has crept up to 36 years old. These aren't people in their 20s starting families and building equity. These are people well into their careers, often with dual incomes, who've been saving for over a decade and still barely make the cut. And even then, many are giving up. Only 13% of London renters now say they plan to buy in the next 12 months, down from 29% in 2022. The rest have accepted that home ownership isn't happening for them. They're staying in the rental market, not by choice, but because there's nowhere else to go. The rental market is absorbing an entire generation of would-be homeowners, and that's keeping demand artificially high, even as prices climb beyond what most people can reasonably afford. There's a concept that gets thrown around in property economics called the affordability ceiling. The idea is that rents can only rise so far before they hit a natural limit where tenants simply can't pay anymore. Back in 2023, Savills claimed that London had hit this ceiling, with renters spending 42.5% of their income on rent. They predicted that rents couldn't rise much further without exceeding tenant capacity. They were wrong. Rents have continued climbing despite already consuming well over 40% of income for many people. The so-called ceiling keeps breaking because people don't have a choice. They can't buy. They can't leave London if their job is here. They can't move in with family if they don't have family in the city. So they accept it. They pay whatever it takes, even if it means giving up everything else. People are living with lower standards than they ever thought they'd accept. No savings, no holidays, no luxuries. Some are offering 6 months' rent upfront just to secure a property because the competition is so fierce. Bidding wars for rentals are now a real thing. Not bidding to buy, bidding to rent. Prospective tenants are offering to pay more than the asking rent just to get their application accepted over someone else's. And it's working because landlords have their pick of dozens or even hundreds of applicants. Food bank use among renters jumped 30% in 2024, and a significant portion of those users are fully employed. These aren't people out of work. These are professionals with salaries who simply cannot afford to eat after paying rent. The affordability ceiling isn't an economic threshold, it's desperation. People are paying whatever it takes to avoid homelessness, and landlords know it. So what happens when £3,000 a month becomes the average? Let's break down what that actually means in practical terms. £3,000 a month is £36,000 a year just for rent. To afford that comfortably under the traditional 30% of income rule, you'd need a household income of at least £90,000. The median salary in London is £44,000. After tax, that's about £2,800 a month in take-home pay. If you're spending £3,000 a month on rent whilst earning 44 grand, you're spending 106% of your net income just on housing. It's mathematically impossible, even if you're earning £60,000 a year, which is well above the London average. Your take-home is roughly £3,700 a month. £3,000 of that is 81%. You'd have £700 left for everything else. Food, travel, bills, clothing, emergencies, everything. It doesn't work, so who can actually afford £3,000 a month in rent? Dual high-income households where both people are earning 50 grand or more. Multiple sharers, 3 or 4 people splitting the costs, often living in a 2-bedroom flat with someone sleeping in the lounge. People with family wealth or financial support from parents. High earners in finance, tech, law, consulting, the top 10 or 15% of the income distribution. Everyone else, and that's the vast majority of Londoners, gets pushed out. They move to outer boroughs and face 90-minute commutes each way. They accept shared housing well into their 30s and 40s. Or they leave London entirely, giving up careers and opportunities because staying simply isn't viable anymore. The middle-class exodus is accelerating, and it's hollowing out the city. But this isn't just about money. The social consequences of unaffordable housing are profound, and they're being felt across the city in ways that don't always make headlines. Teachers can't afford to live near the schools where they work. Nurses are commuting 2 hours each way to hospitals in central London because they've been priced out of anything closer. Police officers, civil servants, retail workers, the people who keep the city functioning, are being systematically pushed to the fringes or beyond. Councils in boroughs like Newham and Brent are now placing homeless families outside London entirely because there's simply no affordable accommodation left within the city. Working professionals, people with full-time jobs and decent salaries, are being classified as homeless because they can't find anywhere to live that they can afford. An entire generation is accepting that they'll never own homes, and increasingly that they'll never even live comfortably. London is becoming a city of extremes. On one end, you've got the ultra-wealthy, people for whom £3,000 or £5,000 or £10,000 a month is trivial. On the other end, you've got renters who are struggling, stressed, one paycheck away from disaster, and stuck in a system that offers no escape route. The middle, the professionals and families who used to form the backbone of London's economy and culture, is being squeezed out. Areas are becoming hollowed out. Prime locations are filled with wealthy residents and empty investment properties, whilst everyone else is pushed further and further from the centre. The idea of London for Londoners, of a city that works for the people who live and work there, is becoming an empty slogan. So what actually stops this? What breaks the cycle and brings rents back down to something resembling affordable? The uncomfortable answer is that nothing on the horizon looks likely to change the trajectory. The government's responses have been inadequate at best and counterproductive at worst. The Renters' Rights Act, which was meant to protect tenants, is driving landlords out of the market and reducing supply even further. Labour has rejected rent controls, arguing that they'd make the situation worse by discouraging landlords and investors. Building targets are consistently unmet. The city needs 88,000 new homes a year to keep pace with demand, but it's only managing to build around 50,000. Planning permissions are at record lows. Developers are pausing or cancelling projects because the economics don't stack up. Build-to-rent institutions, the pension funds and real estate companies that are supposed to be stepping in to replace private landlords, aren't filling the gap fast enough. They're building, but not at the scale or speed needed to offset the exodus of private landlords. And every new regulation, every additional compliance requirement, every increase in costs or reduction in landlord flexibility pushes more private landlords toward the exit. It's a vicious cycle with no clear way out. Regulations are introduced to protect tenants, which reduces supply, which increases rents, which makes life worse for tenants. The core issue is supply. Until there's a massive sustained building program that genuinely delivers tens of thousands of new homes every year, nothing changes. And that kind of program is years away at best, assuming it ever materializes at all. Right now, the average rent in London sits somewhere between £2,200 and £2,700 a month. By the end of 2026, forecasts from every major property analyst suggest that figure will break through £3,000. In central areas, two-bedroom flats are already there and climbing higher. This isn't speculation or worst-case scenario thinking. This is where the market is heading based on the fundamentals. Supply is shrinking because landlords are leaving. Demand is sustained because people can't buy and can't leave. And the affordability ceiling keeps breaking because desperation overrides economics. £3,000 a month in rent requires a household income of £90,000 or more to be remotely sustainable. The median London salary is 44 grand. The maths doesn't add up, but the rents keep rising anyway. London is becoming unlivable for ordinary working people. Teachers, nurses, young professionals, families, the people who make the city function, are being systematically priced out. The city is transforming into a playground for the ultra-wealthy and a trap for everyone else. When the average rent requires twice the average salary, we've failed an entire generation. The question isn't whether rents will hit £3,000. They will. The real question is, who'll still be able to live in London when they do? And the answer, increasingly, is not the people who built it, not the people who run it, and not the people who make it worth living in. Just the ones who can afford to stay whilst everyone else is forced to leave.